All right, so what I did here is I pulled up my developer tools, my inspector within Chrome, and I've got my form on this side. So this window on the right is linked to the window on the left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this form out. And I'm not so interested in what happens in the browser. At this point, I'm looking at how the browser takes the form data, packages it up, and sends it to the server. So my username will be my email address, and my password will just be password, and I'm going to hit login. Now I totally expect the right hand or the left hand side to error out. If we look at the developer tools and peek into this request, we'll see a few things. I'm not worried about this, definitely not worried about that. All right, so this request, the request contains a lot of different pieces. We've got what the browser accepts in terms of line types, whether it accepts compression, language types, cache control, connection, content length. That's where we get into the form data submission. So all of that text that we put into our form gets captured and calculated in terms of content length. And that comes out to be 51, I believe it's bytes. The content type is URL encoded. The host, the origin, the refer, how we got to this page. I'm not sure what the attribute is. That looks like a Chrome deal. And then the user agent, which identifies the computer and the browser that's being used. So all of that kind of just is the generic header. The secondary piece, which is the form data, is actually what the browser does when it captures the content of the form and packages it up to send it back to the server. Now, Chrome does a nice job of parsing it, makes it look pretty, gives us key value representation. If we go to the view source, it literally packages it up, and I know it's hard to see, so I'll read it to you, as username, which is the name of that text box, equals the value that I typed in, which is Gantoka, and then it does %40. %40 is the URL encoding for an @ symbol. So Gantoka at ucmail.uc.edu. And then once it's done, it puts an ampersand in, and then it says password equals, and in my case, my password was password. So password is the name of the box, equals in the value that I typed in the password field. So this string of text is what is then packaged up and sent back to the server. So those names are important because those names represent the left-hand side of these equations at the moment. And that ultimately gets then picked up and loaded into our view model on the server. Okay?
So it sends that back as like a packet?
It actually sends it back as a full request. It's not just a packet, it's multiple packets of data. But yes.
So like if you had wired chart or whatever in your data.
Yes, you would see the string coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parsed or anything.
Yeah, no, you have to pull apart the characters. But yeah. Okay. So let me actually do one more example here real fast. So I'll do test string. I'm going to check the remember me box and hit login again. Again, the left-hand side will blow up, but I want to look at this right-hand side. So we'll do the unparsed version. So username is my email address, password, I put test string this time, and then I check the remember me box. So if you notice the first time, the remember me didn't even come through. It wasn't checked, so it wasn't valid. It's assumed that I didn't check it, and therefore it doesn't come through. In this case, I checked it, so it includes it as one of the parameters. So again, username equals Gantoka, %40, ucmail.uc.edu, ampersand, password equals test string, ampersand, remember me equals on. So that's what's packaged up and then sent to the server. So these names are important. You can make them whatever you want. It's your discretion. But the rule of thumb is that whatever it is in your view needs to match what's in your model. and that can get a little hairy, but there are tools within MVC to help minimize and actually eliminate that so that you don't run into those issues. Yeah.
Kind of went along with what you were saying with Wireshark and packet saving. Does that mean you wouldn't want to name it like username and password? Because if you did and somebody was doing that, they could just like search for this.
You could, but it's kind of a given considering the refer is called login. I mean, you're going to be able to figure it out. What's really more important is that you need to implement SSL encryption on your server and encrypt the data so that it can't even be deciphered. So if this page was encrypted, you would see this on this end still because this is the browser. The browser knows what's happening, but if you try to sniff it with Wireshark or Fiddler or anything like that, it's not going to be able to determine what this text is. It's just going to be strings of data or encrypted strings of data being passed back and forth. Yeah.
Would that to do that, would that be outside of the scope of this course?
What? SSL?
Yeah.
We can cover it. I've never covered it before. It's technically outside the scope, but if there's enough interest, I don't mind going through and doing it.
I'm interested in that.
Okay. Yeah. We can look into doing it. Sure. I'll make it up. Okay. All right. So does this part though make some sense? What's happening here? All right. All right, I kind of explained why, but does anybody know why I'm getting this error? It's not set up yet. But why isn't it set up yet? Yes.
There's no method for the post request?
Yes. So there's no method specifically to handle the post request. If I hadn't have put that attribute on there, that HTTP GET on my controller. So if I actually take this and comment it out, stop debugging. If I take that out, I rebuild, and I'll rerun. What would happen is my action would pick up my post back, because it'll handle both gets and posts, but my get just says return a brand new page. So that post back data, that form data that I sent it, it's completely ignored, doesn't care, and it just sends back a brand new page. So as great as that sounds, that I only had to write it once, it does me no good because that data just gets ignored. Now, there are ways of making the method do both. You can do a get and a post inside the same method. You kind of run on the verge of spaghetti code depending on the complexity of your post back. You basically have this, if it's a get, do this one line of code. If it's a post, do this 15 lines of code inside of your method, and it's hard to read, hard to remember, and hard to maintain. So being able to use those attributes and creating two separate methods helps you visually see, just by looking at the function call, whether I'm handling data coming in or if I'm just simply handling data or handling a request for a new page. And you can actually capture attributes using gets, and we'll talk about that a little bit more near the end of the class, but keeping them separated is typically a good design pattern.